Hello students, today we're going to continue our study of measurement and we're going to look at volume and we're going to look at the volume of cones and spheres. Okay? The cool thing is that the formula for volume of a cone is very similar to the formula for the volume of a cylinder. Okay? So, let's draw a cone first of all. A cone. Okay, there's a cone. It is a cone. Just like an ice cream cone perhaps, the ones that have a point at the end. You might find it in paper cups. They're attached to like a big cooler. You can pull them off, those are cone shaped. And the base of a cone, we've talked about before, is a circle. Okay, so the formula for the volume of a cone is a bit different because it's not quite, there's not two circles that are bases, there's only one. So that means that the volume is 1/3 capital B H. Okay? And so here's where we have to go back to capital B. What is capital B? Capital B is the area of the base. And so we got to figure out what is the shape of the base for a cone, and the shape of the base is a circle. So then what I might want to do is rewrite this as 1/3 pi r squared h, which you will recognize is exactly the same as the formula for the volume of a cylinder. We just have to multiply it by 1/3 because a cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder if they have the same base and the same height. Okay? And so we need to know, for instance, let's say that in this one d equals 14 and the height is 12. Okay? The height is 12, the diameter is 14. So now what we have to do is figure out what the volume is. So I'm going to plug in my numbers. So V equals, again we have the 1/3. We're going to use the pi button on our calculator and we have to look at the radius. Over here I have the diameter is 14. So remember, to find the radius we have to do 14 over 2, which equals 7. So I'm going to put times 7 squared and then times the height. Now it's important to know that the height is always formed at a right angle. So you can see there's a right angle right there. Well, you can't because it is there. There's a right angle there. And so the height is going to be 12, which is that dotted line. Now you might think, well, how long is this little side of it? That doesn't matter for volume. That matters for surface area later on. That doesn't matter for volume. The height is the distance from the tip down to the circle. And so that in this case is 12. Okay? And so then what I would do is I would use my calculator. If you hit Control Divide on the TI Inspire, then that gives you a fraction. And then once you're done with that fraction, hit the right arrow, and then you hit the pi key times 7 squared times 12. That will give you your answer. And once again, please round to the nearest hundredth when you do this. So I'm going to let you plug this into your calculator, and then you're going to find out what the volume of this cone is, and we'll talk about that later. So the next cone we're going to look at is going to be angled just a little bit differently, because sometimes you can use as a cone as a funnel. Okay, so we got a cone, and I'm going to put this is going to be 15 millimeters, and then we have the height is going to be 30 millimeters, and so we need to find the volume of this cylinder. Oh, that's not a cylinder, it's a cone. Volume of this cone. So we'll go V equals 1/3 capital BH. And what is capital B? The area of the base. And what shape is the base? A circle. Okay, so then I'm going to do V equals 1/3 pi r squared h, because that B equals that pi r squared right there. And now I'm going to plug in my numbers. What is R? In this case, R is 15 because it gives me halfway across the circle, which is the radius. So V equals 1/3 pi times 15 squared times the height of this cone is 30. And so I would plug that information into my calculator, and that would give me the volume of this cone. That's all for this part. There's more. So the next shape we're going to look at the volume of is a sphere. And you might remember the sphere is like shaped like a ball, okay? It's round all the way around, and the point from the center to anywhere in that surface on the outside would be the radius, okay? So any point from the center to the outside is the radius. So it might be drawn like this, could be run over to the side. From the center to the outside is the radius. The formula for volume of a sphere is very different, okay? We still have pi, and we still have r, but all the other numbers are very different, okay? The formula for volume of a sphere is V equals 4/3, not 1/3, 4/3 times pi times r to the third power. Very, very important, third power, okay? 4/3 times pi times r to the third power. So let's plug in our numbers. There's only one number to plug in, that's the r. So V equals 4/3 pi times 18 to the third power. Now, there's something a little bit tricky about this, so let me grab my calculator. And let's show you this real quick. So let's show what we're going to do on here, okay? So I'm going to see if I can show this to you right quick. Let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to see if I can do it backwards. So the first thing I need to do is go to Control, Divide, and that gives me a fraction. So I'm going to put a 4 on top, hit my down arrow to the third, go to the right, and then I'm going to multiply by pi, which is down here in the bottom corner, pi, and I hit enter, and then times, here's where it gets tricky, this is 18, and now to get to the third power, I have to use the to the power of button, which is this little pointed arrow right up. It's right next to the x squared key, so I hit that to the power of, and notice that it goes to the power right there, and so I'm going to type in a 3. I hope you can see that. I hope that made sense. And hit enter, and there's my answer, and we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. Okay? So in this case, our answer is 24429. So V equals 24429. There's something crazy going on. Because what you'll notice about your calculator is no decimal afterwards. That's kind of important. Your calculator only stops at 5 digits, it looks like. So sometimes you're going to have to round. So we'll have to make sure we can figure that out with this calculator. But anyway, 4/3 times pi times 18 to the third power, and that gives us the volume of our sphere. Now you're probably looking at that thing and saying, Mr. Cohens, you are a bad artist. Well, yeah, I am. I know that. Not a problem at all with me. But what this isn't a sphere. You know what it is? Maybe. I can't hear you, so I don't know what you're saying. It's a hemisphere. A hemisphere is a half of a sphere, where it's split down the middle of the sphere, and that creates two halves of the sphere. You might think of this as the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere of the Earth. You know, it's cut by the equator, or the western hemisphere and the eastern hemisphere, if we cut it by the prime meridian, if I'm not mistaken. Either way, it cuts it into two different halves. Okay, so now let's use our thinking caps and let's see, how would I find the volume if it's just half a sphere? Well, we still know that the volume is 4/3 pi r cubed, but if we're just doing half of that, then we need to multiply by 1/2. So we're going to do 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times r to the third. Now, you don't have to have that memorized. You know, you just multiply it by 1/2. It's just half a sphere. Okay? But what you do need to have memorized is the 4/3 pi r cubed. You need to know the formula. So now let's plug in the only number that we have. And what's the radius? The radius is 12, because it's from the center to any outside edge. So we're going to do V equals 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times 12 to the third power. Okay? So again, to put 1/2 in the calculator, you can either change that to 0.5 or you can leave it as 1/2, and then times 4/3. Now, you cannot change 4/3 to a decimal because it's a repeating decimal, and you can't plug in repeating decimals into the calculator, so you have to leave 4/3 as 4/3. But if you want to make 1/2 0.5, you're welcome to do that, whatever is easiest for you. If it's a repeating decimal, and anything that has a 3 at the 3 is the denominator or 9 is the denominator is a repeating decimal, so you have to put those in as fractions. 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times 12 to the 3rd power. Plug that in the calculator, see what you get, and we'll talk about it at Math Workshop. So the last thing we want you to do in this video is to find the volume of these two shapes completely on your own. Write out the formula and plug in your numbers and then calculate using your calculator. We got a cone, we got a sphere. Figure out if it's the diameter or the radius, find the radius, plug it in, and figure out what the volume of both of those shapes are. And we'll talk about it at Math Workshop.